Let's sing together that last verse. Rejoice in glorious hope. Rejoice in glorious hope. Our Lord and Judge shall come and take his servants up to their eternal home. Lift up your heart, lift up your voice, rejoice again, I say, rejoice. Remain standing for offertory. We'll sing all four of hymn number 77. How lovely is your dwelling place, O Lord Almighty, for my soul longs and even faints for you. For here my heart is satisfied within your presence. I sing beneath the shadow of your wings. Better is one day in your courts, better is one day in your house, better is one day in your courts than thousands elsewhere. Better is one day in your courts, better is one day in your house, better is one day in your courts than thousands elsewhere, than thousands elsewhere. One thing I ask, and I would seek to see your beauty, to find you in the place your glory dwells. One thing I ask, and I would seek to see your beauty, to find you in the place your glory dwells. Better is one day in your courts, better is one day in your house, better is one day in your courts than thousands elsewhere. Better is one day in your courts, better is one day in your house, better is one day in your courts than thousands elsewhere, than thousands elsewhere.
Hope you made it to Sunday school this morning. I found, as I studied through the lesson, as I taught it, I found it quite challenging. If you didn't make it, Asa and the people he was governing as king turned to the God, followed him, and recommitted their life. They made this huge sacrifice. It was a huge worship service, is the way I described it, or the way I think of it. Had a lot of animals were sacrificed. But the lesson pointed out worship was more than service. It requires a real commitment. It requires a sacrifice. It requires obedience. Paul challenges us to live a holy life. Live a life that's an example for others to follow. I hope that's what we can do as Christians, as members of His church. If we can do that, that draws other people close to Him. Let's pray. Heavenly Father, we thank you so much for this day, dear Lord. We've set aside to worship you, dear Lord. You give us, dear Lord, you tell us to not be distracted by the world, not be distracted by things that does not deserve our attention, but puts our attention on you. Help us, dear Lord, to live a holy life, exemplify your examples that can draw others close to you. Help us now give back to you. In Jesus' name I pray.
As we continue, we'll sing 615, 629, and 104. You can remain seated. Trials are on every hand, and we cannot understand all the ways that God will lead us to that blessed promised land. He will guide us with His eye, and we'll follow till we die. We will understand it better by and by. By and by, when the morning comes, when the saints of God are gathered home, we will tell the story how we've overcome. We will understand it better by and by. Temptations, hidden snares often take us unawares, and our hearts are made to bleed for some thoughtless word or deed. And we wonder why the test when we try to do our best, but we'll understand it better by and by. By and by, when the morning comes, when the saints of God are gathered home, we will tell the story how we've overcome, and we'll understand it better by and by. Through it all, through it all, I've learned grab a hymn book, I want to kind of sing. We've done this one before, but it's kind of a newer one, and I want us to do it again. Hymn number 12. May our homes be filled with dancing. May our streets be filled with joy. May injustice bow to Jesus as the people turn to pray. From the mountains to the valleys, hear our praises rise to you. From the heavens to the nations, hear our singing. Fill the air. Shine in the darkness as we walk before the cross. May your glory fill the whole earth as the water o'er the seas. From the mountains to the valleys, hear our praises rise to you. From the heavens to the nations, hear our singing. Fill the air.
Y'all glad to be here today? Y'all awake? I ain't got one thing to say. Ain't God good? He is. God is good all the time. It is true. But God is good. I'm glad you're here. I'm glad I'm able to be here. We're going to jump right in. This is a new series we're starting today. I'm real excited. This message, or the 3 messages in this mini-series, this is where I struggle probably the most as a pastor. And this is going to be, I mean, it's more for me or so than it would be probably for you. And you'll understand it once we get into this. But if you will, take your Bibles. We need to turn over to the book of the little bitty book of Habakkuk, way over in there. And Old Testament. It's going to be 12 verses. I'll try to enlighten you exactly what was going on and his life and what was actually happening. Let's see if we can. Habakkuk chapter 1, verses 1 through 12. If you will, hang in there with me. This is a rather lengthy passage. The oracle which Habakkuk the prophet saw. How long, O Lord, will I call for help, and how you will not bear? I cry out to you violence, and yet you do not save me. Why do you make me see iniquity, and cause me to look on wickedness? Yes, destruction and violence are before me. Strife exists, and contentions arise, and therefore the law is ignored, and justice is never upheld. For the wicked surround the righteous, therefore justice comes out perverted. Verse number 5 says, Look among the nations, O serve, be astonished, wonder, because I am doing something in your days. You would not believe if you were told. For behold, I am raising up the Chaldeans, and that fierce and impetuous people who march throughout the earth, to seize dwelling places which are not theirs, and they are dreaded and feared. Their justice and authority originate with themselves. Their horses are swifter than leopards, and keener than wolves in the evening. Their horsemen come galloping, their horsemen come from afar, for they fly like an eagle swooping down to devour. All of them come for violence. Their horde of faces moves forward. They collect captives like sand, and they mock at kings, and rulers are a laughing matter to them. They laugh at every fortress, and held up rubble to capture it. And then they will sweep through like the wind and pass on, that they will be held guilty. That they whose strength is their God, are you not from everlasting, O Lord, my God, my Holy One? We will not die. You, O Lord, have appointed them to judge, and you, O Rock, have established them to correct. Let's pray. Father, I'm in need of this message myself as much or more than anybody in here today, Lord. And Lord, we can see what happened in this man's life and how it relates to our life, and not just go back and tell a story or preach a sermon. But God, I feel like this has strong relevance for us today, because a lot of us are sitting right where this man was at, struggling with doubts, struggling with the smoke to trying sometimes to follow God's lead. Father, I pray you would, Lord, to bless this time of your reading of your word. I pray, God, that it would be real. God, I pray, God, that you would just touch our hearts, prick our hearts, whatever it takes. Father, I pray that it would happen. Lord, I'm just dependent on you today, God. I really, really pray, God, that the Spirit of God would continue to move in the life of New Hope Baptist Church. And Father, Lord, I pray for a special unction from above. Lord, an anointing from you, because if I don't have it, Lord, I don't want to be any part of this. Father, I just want to be able to serve you in full strength and power that comes through you. In Jesus' name, amen. Well, when I was a little boy, I had a parakeet, and I loved that parakeet. His name was Doodler. He was green. One day, on a Sunday afternoon, somehow the cage door came open, and he flew away. Naturally, you'll never catch him again because he's gone. And so, therefore, I have a little special place in my heart for birds. I like to watch them in the zoo, and these different parrots. They're so colorful, vibrant colors, you know. Pardon me. Well, there was one pastor. One day, there was this pastor, and he was an older pastor, and he confided in his church members, and he told them, and you have to remember, too, that preachers are people, and we get depressed, discouraged, and all that stuff like y'all do. And I guess his wife must have died. He was a little bit lonely. And so one of the church members suggested to him, he said, Preacher, you need to go buy a pet. And so he got to begin to think about this, and the more he thought about it, he said, that's a pretty good idea. I think I need to go and find some kind of a pet. So he goes out, and he looks around, and he finds a parrot. And so unfortunately, it wasn't 5 minutes after he got this bird home, this bird starts in on him, and apparently he's heard somebody down there at the store where you come from had used some ugly words, and this bird was just letting them go one after another. And he wasn't too friendly with the preacher. And so about an hour goes by, and it gets to be too much, and the preacher walks up to him, and he slaps on that cage, and he yells at him, and he said, "Quit it!" That's what he told him. About this time, the parrot got madder and madder at him, and they had the eyes toward each other, and finally the preacher said he'd had enough. He said, That's it, all right, I've had enough of this. And he grabbed a blanket, walked over, and he put it on top of the cage, and he said, "And I told you to shut up. Don't you say another thing." Well, he was sort of nice a little bit there for a minute, but you know how it is. And this lasted for only a few minutes, and finally the preacher removes the blanket, and immediately the parrot stares right at the pastor again. He looks at him, and they're looking at each other, and by this time the preacher is so infuriated, and he grabs this parrot by the throat, and he begins to just choke him, and he takes him and he chunks him in the freezer. He said, "That's going to teach you." Well, it wasn't long that he got very, very quiet inside that freezer. And first he thought, well, you know, I must have hit him on the head. He's dead or something. He becomes worried, and he runs over to the freezer compartment on top of the refrigerator, and the parrot, the man leaves the door open, and there was a parrot. He was just sitting there, and he climbs out of the freezer, and he flaps the ice off of his wings, and he looks at the preacher, and he says, "I'm awful sorry about the trouble I've caused you, preacher. In the future, I'm going to do my best to improve my vocabulary." Pastor, like, what? It's got into him. I mean, it was like just in a few minutes. And it wasn't long. Here it comes. He can't believe this transformation of this parrot. Finally, the parrot turns to the pastor, and he says, "By the way, what does a chicken do?" Chicken was in the freezer, frozen in the freezer. He thought he better get his act straight. I want to talk to you about doubting God, and when I say that, it's basically sometimes we debate with God, don't we? We debate God, and this is something I feel like it's going to really help us, and we want to look at Habakkuk's life and try to make relevance to what we live in and what's going on around us. On Saturday, March 25th, 1914, at 4:40 p.m., it was just 10 minutes before time to close. There was a fire that broke out on the top floors of the 10-story Ash building in New York, and there was about 140 members out of 500. They were employed there, and they was working hard, and they died that day because they couldn't get out of the fire. And what had happened is the ladders had collapsed, and all their escape ways had just closed up. And a lot of them went on the top floors and jumped to their death. They just, like they did during the Great Depression when folks didn't have much money, and their money had been lost on Wall Street or whatever it was, or banks. And, you know, that didn't say there's a lot of them that died that day. And because of this, when you go by a fire extinguisher, you look at that fire extinguisher, you look at that little alarm on the wall, that is the fire that caused safety, I guess you would say safety rules and regulations to come into play. They didn't want that ever to happen again. But, you know, that didn't save the lives of those that were there that perished that day. There was mothers and fathers and sons and daughters that they perished in the flame. And so when we hear a story like that, our thoughts go to the question of why. Why does somebody have to go through with something like that? We hear of what is going on around us, all of these different shootings and things like that. The question is, why? Well, for one thing, I've heard people say, well, it is the end result of sin. Maybe it's not our sin, it's someone else's sin. And when it's finished, what does they say? It brings forth death. And so somebody else's sin can affect another innocent person. Perhaps there might be another tragedy that we've had that will resonate with you. March 11, 2011, it was about 2:46 p.m. There was this massive earthquake, and it struck Japan. Some of you remember that. And there were several lives lost, but the greatest loss didn't come from the actual earthquake. What happened is that when they have an earthquake near the ocean area, it bothers the actual floor of the ocean, and they have plates underneath the earth, and they rub against each other. That's what causes all this rattling. And all of a sudden, it causes a bulge of water to go up, and it just starts a big wave, and it gets bigger, and it gets bigger. It's called a tsunami. And so the tsunami was like 90 feet tall, and it came in there and it killed 16,000 people in that tsunami. You know, we're not the first ones to have to go through a devastating event. And the question we may ask is why? Why? You know, in fact, these tragedies, they point to the two greatest questions that every preacher, if they're going to be honest, and a lot of them are real pious, and look, I don't care who they are, they're human, and they fight with some of the same things you do too in their life, because the devil throws it in front of us. But these tragedies, they point to the two greatest questions that every preacher struggles with and wrestles with in his ministry. Now, I promise you that you do. You know, two questions are simple. Why does God, or why doesn't God? Those are the two things that we struggle with. And if you've ever watched the news of a man-made or natural disaster, or if you've had a tragedy to occur in your own life or maybe in your family, you probably have found yourself asking the question, well, why does God allow a 6-month-old baby to die in a car accident? Or why, like a lady I noticed this week on Facebook, she was in St. Jude's, and the child was no more than just seemingly a couple of months old, no more than a year-old, had cancer and was going to receive chemo. And I'm thinking, my word, we all know what chemo's done to our friends and things like that. And so why did God allow that Christian to go through the pain and the death that caused the cancer? Why did the preacher, Danny Purser, a preacher of the gospel in Philadelphia, he got cancer, and he looked like skin pulled over bones. He was literally, it ate him up. And so why didn't God stop this tsunami that they was going through? In fact, I want to be even more candid with you. And we're just going to talk about it right down where we live at today, all of us. Because you deal with some things, and you have asked the question, why? In my own family, I've been involved in some tragedies in my own family and some things that have gone on. And so, you know, we can shake our fist in the face of God at that moment. But all over this world tonight, this very night that we're going to live, there's people that are going to bed, they're sleeping with a tear-stained pillow and doing just that. They're shaking their fist at God, and they're asking those two questions, and that is, why did you or why didn't you? Because we're human, and we have that nature to ask that question. If you've ever felt like shaking your fist in God's face, or even gone ahead and did it, you were not the first person that's ever done that, and you will not be the last person that's ever going to do that. And so this entire book of the Bible, as we're looking at in the book of Habakkuk, it is built around a man that did just that. And that's what I want us to camp out on. Habakkuk, he was human, he had issues, and like, God, why did you allow this to happen? So it's a book that we're going to be studying over the next couple of weeks, and I'm sure that most of you have probably read at least through it one time in your life. I don't know about you, but I still have a hard time finding that book. It's so small. But it's called Habakkuk. How many of you would say that Habakkuk is your favorite book? I didn't think so. It wasn't nobody. For the next couple of weeks, we're going to talk about what happiness is. And for the next 3 weeks, do you know what happiness is? Happiness. Excitement. Happiness is sitting next to somebody who knows where the book of Habakkuk is in the Bible. But let me just say this. When you go to that book, it's in the Old Testament, and you turn between the books of Proverbs and the book of Malachi, and it's toward the end of the New Testament. He's one of the books that's called a minor prophet, but there's nothing minor about this prophet called Habakkuk. The only time that he is ever mentioned in the entire Bible is in his own book. And even his name, it sort of clues us in on what this book is about. And so the name Habakkuk, it literally means to embrace. It means to wrestle. And so the Hebrew word is a picture of a wrestler in a wrestling match with an opponent. And so that is exactly what Habakkuk is doing in this book, his book. He's wrestling with that question. Why? That's the hard part for me as a pastor. I have to help people, and sometimes you don't have an answer. You don't have the answer as a preacher. You don't have an answer maybe as your best friend that come to you. And this is exactly what Habakkuk was doing. He's wrestling with his faith in God, and he's wrestling with the God of his faith. So what makes this particular prophetical book unique from all the other ones The others, of course, have what we would call an extended sermon or a long letter, or just repeated some warnings and things like that. But this book is a dialogue between Habakkuk and God. You know, it's his personal diary of 3 prayers that he prayed to God and 2 answers from God. And we're talking about debating God. Today is doubting, of course, but this whole series is debating God. Who in their right mind is going to debate God? When a boxer or a wrestler is on the ropes, it means they're in trouble. Oh man, he's on the ropes. He's in trouble. They fix to knock him down, and that's the way we talk sometimes. And sometimes we get on the ropes too. But speaking of Habakkuk, you know, I think about some of the things that we've faced recently. I've noticed some of the things that you had to face. You know, I question, and who am I to question, but you know, it rains and it pours on some people. My brother has Parkinson's, and I look back over his life, and he's Gideon, and he's trying to serve God faithful. And his wife, he was just married not long, and his wife fell in the bathtub and she was killed. And the list just goes on and on and on. And I'm like, you know, help me to understand this. And that's where I'm at right now. Sometimes our strength, it gets weak. If you ever struggle with your faith, or even more, if you struggle with God, you're having a hard time believing that God cares, or God's even listening, or God's even involved in our lives, then this book, this series is what we're going to be going over is for every one of us. If you've ever been mad, if you've ever been mad at God, if you've ever gotten bitter at God, if you walked in here today with a hidden fist in the face of God, you're about ready to say to God, I'm as mad as, you know what? I'm not going to take it anymore. And I'm thinking, who are we to say that to God? If the fire of your faith is slowly but surely being extinguished by the water of doubt, then this book, this series is for you. It's a question that has caused a lot of people a lot of sleepless nights. Sometimes when people get worried, they don't eat. I've never had that problem. How many of you would admit with me, when you start to worry, you go to the refrigerator? I know I am. God, I'm the only one I think when I'm right there. Somebody's lying. Really, you get nervous. Sometimes you think you have everything nailed down and it comes apart. When it seems like the bad guys is winning more often than the good guys, you know, where the naughty and the nasty seem to always get victory over the neat. He is wrestling with this question here. If God is good and God is in control, then why is the world the way it is? Think about that for just a moment. This is a very question that a lot of students have asked me, the college students. So Habakkuk, he's literally drying up in a desert of doubt. And if you're here, or you've been there, or you're there right now, there's one thing that Habakkuk will encourage you to do, and that is remember. Remember. It's not a sin to doubt. Some of you may differ on that with me. If you act on that, then that's where you step into sin. I want you to listen to these words. If faith never encounters doubt, if truth never struggles with error, if good never battles with evil, how can faith know its own power? In my own pilgrimage, if I have to choose between a faith that has started to doubt in the eye and made it blink, or a native faith that has never known the firing line of doubt, I will choose the former every time. I hate to tell you the end of the story. You figured it out already. In the end of the book of Habakkuk, he's staring at his doubts right in the eye, and faith wins. Faith wins. If you, I don't know how to say this. This is sometimes you have to preach uncomfortable things, especially when it's dealing with your own self. because we sometimes don't like to face the truth. But I do want to warn you, the battle is difficult, the struggle is hard, and the victory is painful. But as we begin here this incredible journey about this great man here who encountered a great question and he won a great struggle. Over 2,500 years ago, this man lived. And here is what we will learn. The key takeaway. When he puts a handle on the suitcase and you can carry it home with you, this is what I want you to get out of this message today. When we don't understand what God is doing, we need to remember who God is. Don't you think that is worth thinking about? When you begin to remember, you sit there and you say, I don't understand why this is happening. Don't forget who God is. There's a lot that we're going to need to learn about doubt and how to handle your fist-shaking moment. And he does two things, and both of them which have to do if you're going to win this match. Number one, you need to honestly confront God. Verse 1 and 2. That's honestly confront God. Let me give you a quick historical background about Habakkuk and his writings here. The two greatest kings that ever lived in Israel was by King David and his son, King Solomon. And so it was under their reign at Israel they became a world power. They come together as one superpower, as one kingdom. And so they were very blessed in the ability to be able to rule and was a warrior. And that's what Israel liked, a leader that was fearless. And so there was a period of time when things were so right that they were right with God, that they was literally, seemingly, an invincible nation. And so there was decay, and there was a decline that set in when Solomon's heart began to leave the Lord, this king that we talked about. And he disobeyed God, and he began to intermarry with pagan women. He set up pagan shrines, and Israel soon fell into idolatry. And after Solomon died, there was a civil war for control for the kingdom. And it actually broke up, and it was the northern and the southern kingdom. Israel to the north, Judah was to the south. And because of Israel's rebellion, they was taken captive by the Assyrians, and only Judah was left. A sad, sad time for the history of Israel. And for a time, they spared Judah, even under a good king's name. Was named Josiah. He was supposedly a great king. And he brought revival and reform to a nation that had let go of God and had let revival blow out the window. And Judah, once again, he turned to paganism and they turned to paganism and idolatry. And they did not listen to what God had told them or the messenger that God had sent them. And so Habakkuk had been praying for God to do something, to do something, to do something. Prayer, instead of becoming a solution, in verse 1 and 2, how long, O Lord, must I call help, but you do not listen? God, I have prayed and prayed and prayed, and it's just, I don't see it happening. I don't see you moving. I don't see you acting. He's been praying a long time to God about his country. He's worried about the folks that he loves. He's worried about his homeland. And he's been calling out to God, and day after day, and week after week, and month after month, and year after year, and his frustration hit what they call code red. Put it mildly, he gets downright blunt with God. This is what makes Habakkuk a different kind of prophet from all the others in the Old Testament. Instead of confronting his people, he confronts God. And his problem now is not so much the nation's iniquity, but he's having a problem with God's indifference. Almost to the point of insulting. He basically says to God, I know you're not dead, and I know you're not deaf. You've ever had the experience of praying about something or another, and praying about something so hard and so long, and something, and you believed it. You believed it, no doubt in your mind. You believed it. Man, that's a no-brainer. I mean, surely God's going to answer that. And you didn't get a response. Then you know exactly what this man Habakkuk was going through. You prayed for the baby to live, but it didn't. You prayed for the marriage to make it, but it didn't. You prayed for bad things to change to good, but they got worse. You're tired of dialing up God on your prayer phone, and you're only to hear these words, sorry, the number has been disconnected. It's not just God's indifference that that's ripping Habakkuk's heart out, but it's God's seemingly not paying attention in action. Look at verses 2 through 4. Oh, cry out to you, violence, but you do not save. Why do you make me look at injustice? This man has got he's poured his heart out. Why do you tolerate wrong? He's talking to God. Destruction and violence are before me, and there is strife and conflict abounds. It's everywhere. Hello, don't we see that around us today too? Therefore the law is paralyzed, and justice never prevails. And the wicked hem in the righteous, so that justice is perverted. Habakkuk chapter 1 and verse 2 through 4. So Habakkuk, he's looking at a culture. He's looking at a country that is literally disintegrating before his eyes. I'm afraid we're looking at a country that is disintegrating before our eyes. Elected officials, they're lining their pockets with gain. And this is basically what he was saying. This is Parker's paraphrase of what Habakkuk was saying. People are messed up. Cultures are messed up. Families are messed up. Systems are messed up. Children don't have dads. Policemen are not enforcing the law. Attorneys are not out for justice. They're just out for bucks. And judges don't care about justice. All they care about is power. And they don't care about the people that's under them. The innocent get shafted while the guilty go free. If you do the right thing, you can get sued. If you do the wrong thing, you can get away with it. It's very interesting that he repeats the word violence here twice. And so, would anyone deny that we're living in an increasingly violent society? We have abortion, all the way to euthanasia, battered wives, battered children, shootings in schools, people who make homemade bombs, riots in the streets. We have genocide. We have road rage. Don't even look across while you're at the red light, because you may see something you don't want to see. Like giving you the bird. Man flipped me off the other day. Just looked. I guess he must have saw my Mississippi State stuff. Yes. But he can get over it. Moving on. And so, as we see here, there is a God in heaven who is all good and all powerful. But yet it just don't compute there. It's just not coming out. Habakkuk, he had pinpointed the single biggest problem that everyone in this room with God can have at times. Do you know what it is? We know God can, but yet God does not do it. He can stop the violence. He can stop the injustice. He can stop the lawlessness. He can stop the oppression, but yet God doesn't. And so when faced with this dilemma, generally we're told one of two things. On the one hand, you have a camp that says, well, yeah, he can do that. Whatever you do, don't you question God. You'll offend him. That's what some people believe. And even if you do question God, you just keep it to yourself. You hear? That's what one bunch says. And on the other hand, there's some people that go to the other extreme and they just simply say, don't believe in God. Why would you believe in a God who can but doesn't? Why would you believe in a God who should but he won't? Habakkuk says, I'm going to do both. I'm going to go to question God even while I believe in God. And I want to draw up close and listen carefully what I'm about to tell you. When you hit the wall with God, and there's going to be times you will, when you wrestle with your faith, when you wrestle with the God of your faith, and you're asking yourself, what am I going to do? You literally are on the ropes. You'll do one of three things, and only one of them's right. Some people will check out. I've tried that Jesus stuff. I know people right now in our church who used to come. You do too. They used to come faithfully. But they hit a real rough spot in life. They hit a tough spot maybe with finances. Might be their marriage. The engine of their life is sputtering and it's not hitting on all 8 cylinders. And you know what they've done. They've completely dropped out of church. Their choice. And the time when they should be in church more than any other time in their life, they quit. They quit. They check out. Then you have some people just back out. They'll just walk away from God altogether. Did y'all read on the Baptist Record about the guy that just denied his faith? He wrote a book. I'm sure some of y'all read that. Man. And he was dealing with some things in his life very similar to what we're talking about. And there's all kind of thoughts. Well, maybe he was never saved to begin with, some people say. Some people say, you know, I knew this God thing didn't work. I knew this wasn't for me. He really wasn't real. I know the whole business about God was just religious superstition. If God is who He says He is, and this world would not be in the shape it's in. I have to deal with people, and you do too, that says those very things. I want to tell you both of those responses are futile and fatal. And if you take either one of those approaches, you automatically forfeit the match. We need to do what this man here, what he did. Talk it out. Talk it out. On the one hand, he doesn't hit the panic button and say, hey, oh my goodness, we don't have any hope of it. You know. On the other hand, he doesn't hit the snooze button and lay back and say, you know, it really is not a problem. Just turn your head the other way. He doesn't pretend with God. He just nonchalantly, he doesn't pout with God. He wrestles with God. He gets in the ring and he goes toe-to-toe with God. I want to ask you a question. Are you frustrated with God right now? You know, can I tell you a little secret? He knows who you are. Are you questioning God? Go ahead and question. He knows what you're asking, and He knows the answer. God can handle your questions, your frustrations, your doubts. And here it was in Habakkuk. In his first prayer, we come to God's first answer. God always answers prayer. He doesn't always answer it the way you want to. Sometimes not in the way that we hear it either. Sometimes it might be that we may not even recognize it when that's answered. But God does answer prayer. His answer is amazing. Yes, no, wait. In verse 5 through 11, I'm not going to reread that. Real quickly, in verse 5 through 11. God says basically to Habakkuk here, He says, you think things are bad now? Well, you hadn't seen anything yet. I've been in the process of answering your prayer for a long time, and you just didn't know it. And the reason I haven't told you until now is because if I did, you wouldn't have believed it. And number two, you wouldn't have understood it. So it is with us. You may not have believed it. We may not have understood it. And He says 6 words to Habakkuk. 6 words. And it reminds us of this old adage. Habakkuk 1:6. Be careful what you pray for. You just might get what you pray for. When you get it, you may not want it. He said the words, I am raising up the Babylonians. Well, how is that going to help me? I mean, you see, he didn't know why he was raising those up, apparently. God says, Habakkuk, you've been praying for deliverance of your nation, and I'm going to deliver them. I'm going to deliver them right into the hands of the worst nightmare that you all at your camp have. I don't have time to unpack all of what we're looking at here today, but as you read down through this description of this nation, let me put it this way for you. The Babylonians would make North Korea, Al-Qaeda, and Taliban look like Girl Scouts. To this day, there never has been a more ruthless people in the history of the world than these Babylonian people. Folks, when they come in, they didn't conquer nations, they crushed them. And I'm talking about, that's what you do when you take over somebody else's town. They raped the women, they butchered the babies, and they set houses on fire, and they burned the fields. And so their method of operation was just very simple. It came down to two words: devastate and destroy. And what made it all the worse was the last they said about him in verse number 11. Guilty men whose own strength is their God. Guilty men whose own strength is their God. You see, their God was power. Their God was strength. Their God was their military might. But what God was saying here is that you've been praying that I would send revival to the nation, your people. I'm not going to send revival. I'm going to raise up a pagan, wicked, ruthless nation, and they're going to wreak havoc, and they're going to destroy your nation. And he probably felt like blown away. Habakkuk probably could have said, well, now I'll tell you what, on second thought, why don't you just go back to nothing, and we'll just call this off, and we'll just walk away. You're going to see throughout this study that we're going through right now that God's basic reply is a lesson that we need to learn, and it's a principle that we need to remember when we're wrestling with God. Are you listening? Don't ever judge God by what you think you would do if you were God, because you're not. I'm not. Habakkuk is in a mess. He's in a dilemma here. He had reached a desperation point in his own match with God, and yet he's going to raise up a nation more wicked than my nation. You're going to raise up a nation more sinful than my nation. They're going to rise up, and they're going to do horrible things to my nation. They're going to destroy it. You're sitting there thinking to yourself, I can relate to that. I asked for God one thing, He gives me another. I asked God for a good thing, and He gave me a bad thing. I asked God for this, and He gave me that. At that point, what do you do in your match? Once you honestly confront God, what do you do? Well, folks, there's a lot more I wanted to say in this, and I'm going to save this for next Sunday. Is that okay? Let me just say this, please. Some of you ever struggle with things like what he had dealt with? I know I do. What do you say to a person that will look you in the face and ask you as a pastor the question, why did God let my son die? And they want an answer. There's a lot of things that we'd like to have an answer to. Sometimes it may not be time. Time is not right. Also, you may not be able to. We just couldn't take the heavy load of what he's about to say if we want to hear it. So he does not show us what's better to tell us. And then the other thing, he won't answer quite like he thought he was going to answer. One of the greatest pieces of advice is being ordained in that day I was ordained. This man made me feel like I was free and that I had chains dropped to the floor when he said this. It was an old pastor, Grady Newman. And he looked at me and he said, Tim, in your ministry through the years, you're going to house to be some answers people are going to want. It's okay to say, I don't know the answer. I just have to trust. I don't always have the answer. And it even happens even still recently. Why did God let my son die? It's hard sometimes to look at that person and say, Jesus still loves you. Well, if he does, why did he let my son die? You see, we're human. We have doubts. We struggle. Don't ever assume that we're God. And always be real careful that you don't get bitter and mad at God. I'm serious. You'll find out quick. Because I have. I found out. I got real aggravated. I did. God knows. Just like my daddy and my mama. God didn't have a switch that he whipped me with, but I believe God can get your attention in various ways. But I want this series, honestly, to help every one of us. Because I really struggle with some things. I have a hard time. When you prepare, you do the best you can. And I'm not playing, I guess I am. And yet, you have no one that shows up. Or people that leave, and they may have to leave after Sunday school. And Sunday nights especially. We're working through Revelation. It's a very hard book. The only thing that God has spoken to me about in answering that, you provide what I tell you. They are the ones that are responsible. Either take it or leave it. But you can't make them come to church. You can't make them feed on God's Word. What I want you to do is be faithful to what I've called you to do. That's all. So it is for all of us. Be faithful to the calling that God has called us to. Lord, I am so thankful.